Have you found that your life has settled? That you've settled for less than what you originally intended your life to become? That you've made some kind of compromise with your existence? That you heard the promises of God, that you believed that God would do something great for you and great in you and awesome through you, yet the arduous troubles of life, the attrition that comes upon us just through living, how life dishes out its problems and its pain and its struggles and its trials, that they've been so impacting upon you, upon your family, upon your faith, that you have just kind of put up the white flag of surrender and said, let's just make peace and I'll settle back and I'll just be happy doing my little bit in the corner. Well, Psalm 68 talks to us about moving with God and not settling, but bringing our lives into every dimension that God has intended for us. It's time for us to move out of our comfort zones and to stop betraying our true intent, to come into the light, to move out of ignorance, even self-imposed ignorance, and come into the light of God. So here we are. Psalm 68 is full. It's such a full psalm. You read through it, God's going to talk to you about many, many different things. We'll probably only touch on one thing here today. It says in verse 1, let God arise and his enemies be scattered. Psalm 68 was written for that occasion where Israel brought the Ark of the Covenant from the house of Obed-Edom from Obed-Edom to Jerusalem. And when the Levites hoisted the ark onto their shoulders, the congregation would shout, let God arise and his enemies be scattered. That phrase was originally proclaimed by Moses whenever the cloud moved in the desert and the ark was carried forward in the desert. God still moves when you're in a desert. That's why I'm speaking to you today, to get you to move even though you might be in a desert. He's not just the God for you to have when you're in a good place. He's God when you're in a tough place. We need to be settled enough that we don't move until God moves. Israel didn't move until God moved. So we need to be settled until God moves. Yet at the same time, we need to be simultaneously progressive enough and adventurous enough and obedient enough that when God does move, he finds us moving right along with him. We don't want to be so scattered that we're neither here nor there, or that we are here and there and everywhere all at once, but nowhere in particular. We've got to have foundations. We need to put our roots down deep into something in particular. However, we don't want to be so stuck in our ways that we miss out on the moves of God. So much of the church has not had the flexibility to expand and change and grow and metamorphose and enter the territory where God is taking us. Churches stubbornly holding on to traditions of men, traditions of the past. People wanting to remain in their comfort zones, inflexible, rigid. You'll miss out on God's presence if you stay rigid. So you've got to be flexible and you've got to be obedient so that when God says, okay, now it's time to do this, then you can do it. There was a time where God was pouring out his Spirit and a whole lot of the church didn't want to have the move of the Spirit. And God moved on and they were left back in the dark ages. And then you need to see from this that when God moves, his enemies are scattered. The only hope for our world is a move of God. We need God to move upon us and to move through us. And then we need to move with him into all that he has for us. And as we do so, we'll see God's enemies will scatter. Don't be afraid of the enemy. The devil is afraid of you, because God is on the rise. And if you're rising and moving with God, then let God arise and his enemies be scattered. That's why we need to learn how to move with God, to learn to move when God moves. Then you'll become a mover and a shaker. And everything that can be shaken will be shaken, till only that which can remain remains. Then it says in verse 4, sing unto God, sing praises to his name, extol him that rides upon the clouds. Extol him that rides about upon the clouds by his name, Yah. The cloud rider, that's who God is. He is the cloud rider, and he reveals that his name is Yah. Yah is Yahweh concentrated. Not abbreviated, but concentrated. God is not an abbreviation. This is the concentrated God, pure, undiluted, highest glory and power. And when you're in a dry place, just look for the cloud. Just as the cloud is the concentration of moisture, so Yah is the totally focused God. A cloud in the desert. Imagine that, where you would least expect to find moisture. There is the concentrated cloud of God. That's where God will turn up in a focused way so that he can get you through. So as God rises, as the cloud of God rises and begins to move, so we rise up, receive the nourishment from God that we need. We rise up and we move with him. Then all the enemies scatter before us. Yes, that's how it's done. This world so needs the move of God. And I'm looking for people that are willing to rise up and move with God. God's looking for people who are willing to rise up and move with him. Will you do it? Are you going to do it? Will you rise up and be the people of God, the people he has called you to be, so that he can move in you and upon you and through you and use you to do all that he wants to do within the world? That's the message of Psalm 68. Rise up, you people of power, and see the glory of God rise upon you. We'll see you again tomorrow.